All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the incredible tech that tracks the world's best athletes. We're going to break down how it all works and what it actually tells us about performance. Let's get into it. You know, it seems like a simple question, but the answer is anything but. For years and years, coaches had to rely on just their eyes and a stopwatch. But how do you really measure the grind of a scrum in the corner, or the physical toll of a sudden stop and start on the basketball court? That's exactly the problem modern load monitoring was designed to solve. Okay, first things first, we've got to wrap our heads around this fundamental idea. You have external load, which is basically what the athlete did. The distance they ran, the sprints, the jumps, it's the work. But then you have internal load, and that's how their body responded. It's the biological stress that work created. The exact same workout, the same external load, can have a totally different internal load on two different athletes. It's a really key distinction. So this brings us to the core challenge, right? How do you actually measure all those invisible forces, all the work that doesn't just show up as miles on a tracker, but the work that can truly make or break an athlete's season?
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. I mean, think about a defensive lineman in American football. They might only run a few hundred yards in a game, but the constant battling, the explosive accelerations, the collisions, that is unbelievably taxing. Traditional stats would completely miss that workload, but it's a massive piece of the performance puzzle.
So, how did we crack this problem? Well, with technology, of course. Sports scientists now have this incredible toolkit to see what was once invisible. Let's take a look at the four main systems that teams are using right now.
You've got a few different flavors. On one end, you have optical tracking, which uses a bunch of cameras set up in a stadium. It's great for games, but you can't really pack it up and take it to the practice field. RFID uses wearable tags, which is handy for indoor sports. But the real game changer for day-to-day monitoring has been the wearables. GPS, which we all know, and the real star of our show today, inertial measurement units, or IMUs.
So what's actually inside these little pods athletes wear between their shoulder blades? Well, it's this amazing trio of sensors. You've got accelerometers that feel every single time an athlete speeds up or slows down. You've got gyroscopes that track every twist, turn, and rotation. And then you have magnetometers, which basically act like a tiny compass to orient all that movement. Put them all together and they paint this incredibly detailed 3D picture of an athlete's every move.
Now, check this out, because this is where the power of IMUs really shines. So a long, steady run, yeah, it covers a ton of distance, obviously. But the actual mechanical stress on the body, measured here as player load, can be pretty low. Now compare that to some short, sharp agility drills. You cover almost no distance, but look at that player load. It's through the roof. All that constant accelerating, stopping, and changing direction creates massive stress. This is that invisible workload we were talking about, finally made visible.
Okay, so we've got all this amazing tech, right? But the gadgets themselves are only half the story. The real magic happens when you turn that absolute fire hose of data into real decisions that can help a team win. It's all about the metrics.
We just saw that term, player load, in action. It's one of the most important metrics you can get from an IMU. Essentially, it's just adding up all the little accelerations an athlete's body goes through, in every direction. By boiling all that super complex movement down into one single number, a coach can get a quick, reliable snapshot of the total mechanical stress from any practice or game.
You'd think that speed is just speed, right? Well, it turns out even that can get pretty complicated under the hood. The GPS unit on an athlete's back calculates speed in one of two main ways. The first is pretty much just connecting the dots between location pings. The second, the Doppler method, is way more sophisticated. It actually measures how the satellite signal itself stretches or compresses as the athlete moves, kind of like how the sound of an ambulance changes as it passes you. Now, why does this little detail matter? Because the two methods can give you slightly different numbers. It's a perfect example of why you have to know not just what your tech is measuring, but how it's measuring it. And that brings us to the most important point of all: context. A number by itself is pretty much meaningless. Look at this. A soccer midfielder runs over 10,000 meters and gets a player load of 1,200. An American football lineman runs a tiny fraction of that distance, but their player load is almost as high, because of all the physical explosive contact. Then you have a basketball guard. Their player load is also super high from all the constant jumping and cutting. See, the data only makes sense when you compare it to the specific demands of that sport and that position. Context is king.
So where is all of this headed? Well, like any technology, the goalposts are always on the move. The evolution of athlete tracking is happening at an incredible pace, which is creating some amazing opportunities. And yeah, some brand new problems too.
The engine that's driving all this change is a principle you've probably heard of: Moore's Law. It's this idea that technology gets exponentially more powerful and cheaper over time. For athlete tracking, this means the sensors are getting smaller and more accurate every single year, while the price keeps dropping. It's democratizing the tech, taking it from just the elite pro teams down to colleges and even high schools.
But all this rapid progress has created a massive new headache for sports scientists: standardization. I mean, with so many different companies and different systems out there, how can you be sure the data is actually comparable from one system to the next? The short answer is, you really can't.
Let me show you a real-world example. So, imagine an athlete does a training session, and we track their total distance with System A. Okay, the result comes back, 5,430 meters. Seems simple enough, right? But what if we had that same athlete wear a device from System B during that exact same session? All of a sudden, the number's 5,810 meters. That's a difference of almost 400 meters. This is the interchangeability problem in a nutshell. Different hardware, different software, different math, it can all lead to different results, which is why it's so critical for teams to stick with one system to get reliable, consistent data. When you step back, the journey has been absolutely incredible. We've gone from these giant, lab-based camera systems in the 90s to the wearable pods we see today. And the future? The tech is literally disappearing, right into the clothing itself. We're talking smart fabrics, embedded sensors. Tracking is just going to become seamless. So, to wrap this all up, just remember that crucial difference between external work and internal response. Know that of the four main technologies, it's the IMUs that have totally changed the game by letting us see mechanical stress with metrics like player load T. And most importantly, remember that all this data is only as good as the context you can give it, and how well you understand the limits of the system you're using. Which kind of leaves us with one last thought to chew on. We are getting unbelievably good at measuring, well, everything. But as this tsunami of data just keeps growing, maybe the real challenge for the next generation of sports science isn't about finding new things to measure. Maybe it's about finding true, actionable meaning in the mountains of data we already have. It's something to think about. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.